Welcome to a special Amari Purple Talk, a podcast where I share my thoughts on the Prince musical singularity. I'm Richard Cole, your imagination soloist, and this is a campaign for the time to be considered for nomination in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Today we are celebrating a Prince protege band that I feel should be considered for nomination in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. A band whose albums produced by Prince that are as memorable as Prince's 80s classic albums, led by the master of cool, Morris Day. Ladies and gentlemen, The Time. As always, thanks for listening to Amari Purple Talk. Please leave your comments on the show in the comments below. Also, feel free to visit my website, www.amaricommunications.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at richardcole_now and on Instagram at richardcole_Amari. All right, so for this very special episode of Amari Purple Talk, we're covering 4 topics regarding why The Time should be in the Hall of Fame. The first topic is a brief history of time, and not the Stephen Hawking book, but a brief history of the time itself. Topic number 2, an explanation of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Topic 3, controversies involving inductions. And the fourth and final topic will be why The Time should be considered for induction in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Time is a musical group created in Minneapolis, started in 1981, and it was the creation of Prince along with Morris Day. And the origins of The Time was created starting with a clause in Prince's contract with Warner Brothers that allowed him to recruit and produce other acts. And Prince, known for his diversity, didn't want to be pigeonholed mainly as an R&B artist. So while he, as Prince, is able to explore other forms of music, he wanted to explore something that was strictly R&B, strictly funky. Around this time, his friend Morris Day had been working with him as a videographer, but he's also a phenomenal drummer as well. And the two were kind of just collaborating, and during one of those collaborations, Morris came up with the groove for the song Party Up, and which is on Prince's Dirty Mind album. Prince offered Morris Day, in exchange for the song, either cash settlement of around 10 grand, I believe the number is, or a chance at a record contract. So Morris opted for the recording contract. So prior to the actual creation of the band itself, both Prince and Morris Day went to see the film The Idolmaker. It was a film that came out around 1980 or 81. And it's loosely based on the manager of Fabian and Frankie Avalon. So built around this concept, both Prince and Morris collaborated on the tracks that would comprise the first Time album, self-titled Time album. And the collaboration process, it was mostly Morris Day on drums, Prince handling bass, guitar, keyboards, background vocals by Lisa Coleman, additional keyboards by Matt Fink. But with the completion of the album, they decided to build the band out of existing Minneapolis funk and R&B group Flight Time, which had at one point featured Cynthia Johnson, who left shortly to perform with the group Lips Inc. and record the #1 hit Funky Town. But the core of the band Jelly Bean Johnson on drums, Jimmy Jam on keyboards, along with Monty Moore on keyboards, and Terry Lewis on bass. The last member to join the group was Jesse Johnson, who had played with Morris briefly in another band prior to Morris signing with Prince. And based on his reputation as a phenomenal guitar player, recruited Jesse into the group. So it was with this lineup that became the performing ensemble of the time and the sort of visual presence of the band itself. So the vocal recordings consisted of Morris Day following Prince's guide vocals almost note for note. None of the original 7 played on the debut album, again citing that Prince played most of the instruments himself. Morris Day played the drums on about 90% of the tracks. So the credit for production went to Prince's alter ego, Jamie Starr, and Morris Day. So they are credited as the co-collaborators on this album. So as the band began to gel and open up for Prince, a rivalry developed between the time and Prince, which started during the Controversy tour in 1982. Already frustrated with the control that Prince exerted over the band, the time bonded with the intent of basically upstaging Prince night after night, a feat that they would often accomplish during both the Controversy tour and especially during the Triple Threat tour, which consisted of Vanity 6 as well as The Time being the opening acts. Many stories are documented regarding this rivalry. If you can look on YouTube, there may be a documentary of the time that exists. It was originally with a DVD that was packaged with their final album as the Original 7, titled The Original 7 Condensate. So there's many stories. Also, too, I would recommend, if you don't already have it, reading Morris Day's book, On Time, A Princely Life in Funk, that was released a little over a month ago. It was during the Triple Threat tour in which, again, frustrated by the lack of creative input and also Prince's control not allowing the various members to play or produce songs on acts outside of the time or Prince's inner circle. Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis during this time took the opportunity to fly to Atlanta during a break in the Triple Threat tour to produce songs for the SOS band. A freak snowstorm for the Atlanta area at the time prevented Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis from rejoining the tour, and they were subsequently fired not long after that. They did finish the tour. However, once it was revealed that they were off producing songs for the SOS band, Prince made the decision to fire Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, much to the chagrin of Morris Day. So that sort of led to potential seeds of Morris Day eventually splitting from the time and Prince's contract as well. So with Jimmy and Terry out of the picture, Monty Moore also took the opportunity to leave the time. The three were replaced by Mark Cadenas and Paul Peterson on keyboards and Rocky Harris on bass, which in fact a little bit later he was replaced by Jerry Hubbard on bass. Jerry Hubbard, as well as Mark Cadenas and Paul Peterson and the remaining members of the time, are the lineup that is featured in the Purple Rain film, and it is that lineup that is featured on the cover of the Ice Cream Castles album. So not long after Purple Rain's success, Morris Day left to pursue a solo career. Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, through the success of the SOS band, continued to get production work from various artists, including most famously Janet Jackson, to which they were able to get a Producer of the Year Grammy in 1987. Jesse Johnson also pursued a solo career. Monty Moore and Jelly Bean Johnson soon after Purple Rain, and also Jelly Bean's tenure in the family. That's another protege act for another discussion for another time. But Jelly Bean Johnson and Monty Moore soon joined Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis as part of their production staff. So each one of the members achieved a significant amount of success in the pop and R&B fields. Jerome Benton, who temporarily stayed on with Prince, again, another member of the family, but also, too, a co-star in Prince's second film, Under the Cherry Moon. But the band reunited in 1990 for both the Graffiti Bridge movie and soundtrack, as well as their reunion album, Pandemonium, an album which was originally a Morris Day and Prince collaboration with that would have been a Time album called Corporate World. So that reunion lasted about throughout the year of 1990. They didn't reunite as the original lineup until 2008, and that was on the 50th annual Grammy Awards program on February 10th of 2008. They performed Jungle Love with Rihanna, and they did a brief tour after that, the original lineup, and recorded the album Condensate. But that was recorded under the name of the original seven, since Prince refused to grant rights to use the name The Time. And that reunion lasted a couple of years, or about a year after the release of Condensate, and the band just split apart for various reasons after that. So that is a brief, very brief history of The Time. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was founded by Ahmet Ertegun, who was the founder and chairman of Atlantic Records. Established on April 20th of 1983, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame documents the history of rock music, the artists, producers, engineers, and other notable figures who have influenced its development. There was a museum that was actually dedicated on September 1st of 1995. Now, there are several categories for Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, and those categories include the performers category, and that includes singers, vocal groups, bands, and instrumentalists of all kinds. Now, the voting process to be selected, that includes a number of academics, journalists, producers, and other individuals with music industry experience. Now, an artist can become eligible for induction 25 years after the release of their first record. The ballot process, the ballots are sent to a little over 1,000 historians, members of the music industry, and artists, including every living Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee. And the 5 performers receiving the most votes become that year's induction class. And there are artists that get inducted more than once, usually most times as part of a group, and later if they were a significant solo act as well. Eric Clapton is one of the few who was inducted in what's been dubbed as the Clyde McPhatter Club, named after Clyde McPhatter, who had been inducted twice. Eric Clapton is the only person to have been inducted 3 times. Established in the year 2000, the Sidemen category was established, and that honors musicians who have spent their careers out of the spotlight, performing as backup musicians for major artists on recording sessions and in concert. A separate committee composed mainly of producers chooses those inductees. In 2010, that category was changed to the Award for Musical Excellence. And that gives more flexibility to recognize some people who might not ordinarily be recognized. There is also a non-performers category. This is called the Ahmet Ertegun Award. And basically the non-performer category honors songwriters, producers, disc jockeys, record executives, journalists, and other industry professionals who've also had a major influence on the development of rock and roll. Usually inductees in that category also were performers as well. And this is usually done by the same committee that chooses the early influences. And early influences, people like, say, maybe like a Louis Jordan, Hank Williams, individuals prior to the beginning of rock and roll that had a significant influence on a lot of people in rock and roll. Primarily anyone starting with Chuck Berry all the way through maybe the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. Those earlier influences played a significant part, as well as the obvious contributing factors to rock and roll. And again, the Award for Musical Excellence, a category that honors musicians, producers, and others who spent their careers out of the spotlight working with major artists on various parts of their recording and live careers. Classic examples would be Leon Russell, who was inducted in the year 2011. Tom Dowd, one of the amazing recording engineers. Anything regarding Atlantic Records, productions by Lieber and Stoller, like The Drifters, Benny King. He was an engineer on that. Lots of groundbreaking recordings. I think a lot of the Phil Spector tracks as well. So he was inducted in 2012. You also have Ringo Starr that was inducted in 2015. And my favorite guitar player that's not named Jesse Johnson, Nile Rodgers, was inducted in 2017. He's with the band Chic. Huge influence with that group, as well as a producer of Madonna, Duran Duran, David Bowie's Let's Dance album. So a great producer, one of the greatest rhythm guitar players on the planet. So other famous recipients of this award includes acts that were inducted by a special committee due to controversial exclusions, most oftentimes when the lead singer of these groups were inducted. Those examples include The Miracles, The Famous Flames, which is James Brown's early backing ensemble, The Comets, which Bill Haley was leader of. A group called the Blue Caps, the Midnighters, which was Hank Ballard's band, and the Crickets, which was Buddy Holly's band. And like I said, of course, the Miracles, as in Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. Like I said, their contributions, both on record and on stage, cannot be ignored. So, hence, this category was created to give groups of that nature recognition. Joel Pesserman, who is the president of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, stated that this award gives some flexibility to dive into some things and recognize some people who might not ordinarily get recognized. And of course, we're going to dive into some of the controversies surrounding the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Of course, one of the biggest is the nomination process is controlled by a few individuals who are not themselves musicians, reflecting their personal taste rather than the views of the rock world as a whole. There have been complaints about several pioneering artists, especially from the 50s and early 60s, that were omitted due to the fact that they needed more name power on the list. And that results in a lot of the 70s superstars getting inducted before people who made it possible for them to have careers. Some of those pioneers still aren't in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame at all to this day. Biggest example being Sister Rosetta Tharpe, considered the godmother, the grandmother of rock and roll, but has not been inducted until the year 2017. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremonies are a televised broadcast, and in order to get the ratings, a lot of the inductions, they believe, are considered taking place due to the simple fact that they're trying to get the television viewers, and that they're also trying to sell tickets to the event as well. And basically what it is, it's a ticket to attend the dinner ceremony. And apparently those tickets are pretty high price. So in order to guarantee those tickets selling, in order to guarantee the viewers, quote from Janet Morrissey of the New York Times, stating that with fame and money at stake, it's no surprise that a lot of backstage lobbying goes on. Why any particular act is chosen in any particular year is a mystery to performers as well as outsiders, and committee members say they want to keep it that way. And there's also a quote from John Landau, the chairman of the nominating committee, says they prefer it that way, saying that they've done a good job of keeping the proceedings non-transparent. Another criticism is that a lot of genres get overlooked. Examples being progressive rock. You have a lot of 60s top 40 acts, the Monkees being a primary example. Also a controversy with the Dave Clark Five. We'll discuss those in a moment. Lots of funk, and of course a whole lot of black music gets overlooked as well. Also, too, I want to call attention. It was a tweet that Chuck D put out the day of the current round of nominations that were announced. Among those was the Notorious B.I.G. His tweet, echoing a lot of the statements that I just mentioned here, mentioned the fact that, pioneering hip-hop artists such as Rakim and KRS-One deserve to deserve induction before Notorious B.I.G., and he has a valid point. Now, there was also a round of fan voting, which I still believe you are able to do. So you can go on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame website and look at the current list of nominations and cast your vote in as well. So that being said, Notorious B.I.G. was one of the 5 that I picked for nomination because based on the strength that he is a very skilled MC. My other choices were Rufus and Shaka Khan, Pat Benatar, T-Rex, and the Doobie Brothers. So that being said, like I said, since Notorious B.I.G. is on the ballot and he's a skilled MC and, deserves to be inducted. But with that being said, Rakim and KRS-One are definitely 2 hip-hop pioneers that are long overdue for induction. But again, that'll be a different podcast for another day. But in noticing that tweet, I did reply to Chuck D and said that I was definitely going to mention this in this special episode as well. So again, these are classic examples of politics, favoritism, bias, on why, say your favorite group hasn't been in the Hall of Fame. There's also a Facebook page called Funk Bands that deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I suggest if you guys are on Facebook to follow that page as well and see some of the other choices. Again, great musicians and funk across the board. James Brown, Sly and the Family Stone, and especially Parliament Funkadelic, all Hall of Fame inductees, have had a tremendous amount of influence on rock music to this day. So there's other bands that are equally deserving, equally instrumental, no pun intended, in influencing other musicians that have been able to take rock music, to another level. So definitely check that page out as well. But again, like I said, this reflects a lot of the reasons why a band such as The Time are not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Again, like I said, we're still on the subject of controversies. And 2 of the biggest controversies that keep reoccurring involve the band, the Dave Clark Five. The Dave Clark Five were, after the Beatles, one of the acts as part of the British invasion. For a brief period, they were outselling the Beatles, and to some certain circles, more popular than the Beatles. And that's not to take away from the huge importance of the Beatles, but this was also a band that was influential in a lot of ways, and also equally with the Beatles had a tremendous amount of influence not only on British acts that came after them, but also American recording artists too that have benefited from a long career based on their influence as well. But when it came time to induct them, they were passed over for induction to make room for Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. Now again, that's one of my favorite hip hop artists, and again, equally deserving of the induction. But there has to be a point where a lot of these acts, like I said, you got the Dave Clark Five, you have someone like a Rakim or a KRS-One that have had long careers, that have had huge, tremendous influence over more recent acts or artists that are getting nominated or inducted, or actually inducted, long before these pioneering acts. And a lot of times with these pioneering acts, there'll be years that'll go by. I know there was also a campaign for years, about 3, 4, 5 years prior to her induction, but fans petitioning for Janet Jackson to be inducted. And again, that a long process. Also, to the inclusion of women in general in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's supposedly getting a little bit better, but it's a slow process. So these are sort of the bullet points of the controversies that lead to people campaigning for their favorite artists to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And the reason for this particular episode as well. And from that, we're going to move on to the final topic, which is why the time should be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. When I originally did the prior episode of Amari Purple Talk, which the main topic was just this, I created some initial arguments why they should be inducted. The response had been overwhelmingly positive, and definitely more positive than negative, but not ignoring the negative comments as well. One of those, the main one being several people commenting that, well, Prince did all the work and Prince is already in the Hall of Fame. Well, based on the category for session musicians and live musicians, then the time as a band, as a unit. And originally, this campaign, definitely acknowledging the original 7 members, but I did see a post on Morris Day in the Times Facebook page that gave a lot of shine to the subsequent lineups, and their contributions, I would argue, should be included. Like subsequent members like Freeze, who is the bass player taking over from Terry Lewis. Chance Howard, who was a keyboard player not only with a lineup of the time during the late 90s, was also in lineup of the new power generation during the musicology era as well. Again, a very great session slash stage musician that should be recognized. The various lineups of the new power generation are also equally deserving of induction. The members of the Revolution are also equally deserving as nominations for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as well. So that particular argument that, well, Prince did everything, to me, that's just, I'm going to go out on a limb and just say it's blind loyalty. But that's your opinion, and you're welcome to that opinion. My opinion is that based on the sidemen category, they deserve to be as a band. To me, they belong in that category with the Miracles. They belong in that category with the Comets, with the Crickets, the Famous Flames. You know, those individual members of those groups contributed heavily in executing the sound, the vision, and the mission statement of the artist that was already inducted into the performers category, which is a category I personally feel should be renamed the legends category, just based on the magnitude of with the the very first inductees like Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Elvis, you know, later on the Beatles, Bob Dylan, Jimi Hendrix. You know, those are, you know, we look back, they were not only legends in their own time, but they're legends that stand the test of time. You know, we're here in 2019, you know, and we still celebrate all of those artists. So I feel it should be changed to the legends category. But again, you know, granted, you know, Prince is an exception. He's one of the few. You know, he's like Stevie Wonder who can play every instrument. Paul McCartney has done albums where he's played every instrument. But Paul McCartney wouldn't have been inducted as Paul McCartney solo artist had he not been a member of the Beatles. And I know that's kind of apples and oranges, but making my point, Prince had a vision. Number one, he himself did not want to be pigeonholed as just an R&B artist or just as a funk artist. You know, he looked at himself as being equal to Mick Jagger, as being equal to Elvis or equal to the Beatles, and a lot of times even equal to Michael Jackson. So providing an outlet, because, you know, granted, you know, you listen to those songs, especially those first two Time albums, there's no way you can ignore the funkiness that comes off of those two albums. So to create an outlet for those songs to exist for people to enjoy, and that's another thing too, it's a matter of perspective. A lot of people sort of come in after Purple Rain, and it's a very global thing. And I mean, there's some globally that were there prior to Purple Rain, but they only saw the Prince experience. And based on the Time's short shelf life between 81 and 83, just when they were, you know, for lack of a better term, just as they were standing on the verge of getting it on, then there was a ceiling placed on them. But there's a significant number of individuals that were able to experience the Time, and again, no pun intended, in real time, to see. And you can go back and look up various concert reviews, and it's not taking away from the importance of Prince. We all enjoyed Prince as an artist. You know, we loved Controversy. We loved the 1999 album. And for some of us, I know myself, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but I know for myself, as that was happening, as the Time was happening, as Vanity 6 was coming into play at that time, to me, it was no different than what George Clinton was doing with Parliament, Funkadelic, Bootsy's Rubber Band, Brides of Funkenstein, where there was this sort of movement that was being created. But it was a movement, yes, George Clinton was the figurehead, but it was George, Bootsy, and Bernie Worrell that were writing most of the hits on that. But there were a lot of members of Parliament Funkadelic that were major contributors to some of the most important songs of their career as well. And like I said, the spin-off acts of Bootsy's Rubber Band and the Horny Horns and Brides of Funkenstein, Parlette. You know, to me, it was sort of that same thing. And it was just, to me, Prince sort of emulating that. You know, Rick James was emulating that with the Stone City Band and the Mary Jane Girls. You know, that was sort of the bar to either, you know, raise higher or to match that level of excellence in that. So to put together a phenomenal group of musicians, and that was pretty wise of Morris Day, warning those members of Flight Time, and also Morris Day's insight in recognizing what a phenomenal guitar player that Jesse Johnson is, to go to Prince and say, look, I want these guys to be the band. And Morris Day originally wasn't the lead singer. You know, but again, that's another story, another time story for another day. But again, like I said, the magnitude. You can go on YouTube, and if you can catch the Minneapolis concert from 82, I think it's 82 or 83, during the Triple Threat Tour, and the Times performance. It's not a great video. I don't know if that's a bootlegged video or, you know, my hope is that one day a clean copy of that, or a professionally shot video and mastered or remastered from the soundboard quality, the sound can one day officially be released of that period, and further documenting that moment in history. And you see, you can see, hear, and feel the hunger in that band. And you could see they're sharks. And you could see that with Prince, there's blood in the water. So it's like they are coming out to take over that stage and leave nothing left for Prince to do when it's his turn to come on stage. So, you know, the proof is right there. Like I said, there was a time we weren't aware that Prince did everything. We knew he was connected, but, you know, it's hard to imagine the time when we didn't know that. But like I said, that part of it aside, again, the basics. It was Prince. It was Morris Day. It was Prince honoring a friend. You know, a friend that initially felt betrayed because it was supposed to be the band getting the record deal. Prince left Grand Central to pursue a deal on his own, got that deal. You know, Morris felt left out, tried to move on with his own life, and tried to move on, realized that music is what he really wants to do, and decides to move back to Minneapolis, reconnects with Prince, and, you know, Prince didn't turn him away at the door. I mean, he didn't hand him a record deal right off the bat, but in rekindling that friendship and being there as a friend and helping that friend, you know, videotape the shows. Then as they decided to get together and just jam and collaborate, out of this, the Time was born. So even as, you know, even if you want to just say induct Morris Day as either a producer or a session musician, this category exists. But in all fairness, again, this was Prince's initial vision of the band and the initial image of what he wanted that band to do to express that sort of funk R&B side of him. And to me, they executed it flawlessly. So just on that alone, and not only that, like I said, there's 7 talented individuals, And each one of them have had a significant amount of success even after the demise of the band. And a lot of that success has had a tremendous influence on a lot of bands and also solo artists of the 80s, of the 90s, and bringing it back to the 2000s. I mean, even with in the mid 90s, that Minneapolis sound was a tremendous influence on D'Angelo. There's a tremendous amount of influence on Erykah Badu, Maxwell. So there's artists still today. Bruno Mars is a prime example of the time having an influence on Mark Ronson creating Uptown Funk, but it was a collaboration with Mark Ronson and Bruno Mars that made Uptown Funk the tremendous hit that it was. So, again, to the detractors, like I said, you've just seen examples of a lot of different artists. Artists you may like, artists you may not like, but then that's just for the fan base to deal with, really. But the bottom line is that anyone that you feel is deserving to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and hasn't, doesn't mean you should be pessimistic about it. Maybe this process will change. Maybe more bands will be recognized, not just, rock or classic rock, funk bands. And I mean, yeah, the world's definitely changing. Don't know what it's changing into as far as the current state of popular music or rock music. We do know vinyl's back. We do know that the Beatles keep coming back and selling #1 albums with the same album that they had 50 years ago. But I mean, again, the beauty of it is that it's been remastered and, polished up, and it sounds amazing now. But just quality never goes out of style. And a band like The Time, even with the current lineup, they are consistent. This current lineup is just as tight, just as funky as the original 7. There's just a specialness about the original 7. It's just kind of like, it's like John, Paul, George, and Ringo. To me, the Beatles would not work if you take any one of those three out of the equation. It just will not work. It's that set of group dynamics. And The Time, in its original lineup, deserves to be in that, mentioned within that dynamic. It's just something about those 7 individuals that it creates a specialness to it. But again, like I said, the subsequent lineups of The Time or Morris Day and The Time, again, based on the categories, are equally deserving as well. And if there should come a time that The Time are inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's probably best left up to the original 7, how they, wish to be honored. There's one example regarding the band Kiss, where the, organizers of the event wanted the original lineup only. And again, remember, this is a broadcast event, so ratings, and again, the sales for the dinner, the tickets for the dinner center, I can't talk anymore, the dinner ceremony, those are factors into the bias and the politics behind the scenes that create these controversies for the Rock Hall. So basically, the Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons wanted to have the subsequent members of Kiss, or the replacement members for Peter Criss and Ace Frehley, they wanted the subsequent members to be recognized as well. And that created a big, huge controversy with their induction. There are also groups based on their principles, such as the leader of the Sex Pistols. It's pomp and circumstance, really. But an honor is an honor. So, so there's people like the leader of the Sex Pistols that will decline their induction. There are some that will protest because they feel, thank you for nominating me or thank you for inducting me, but you're really, making a mockery of the genre of rock that I perform in. And I know it's politics and blah, 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 blah. But again, thank you, but no thank you. I know this particular program, this episode was born out of a past tweet that reoccurred on my timeline. I mean, not a tweet, Facebook post from Jesse Johnson from around 2013. Just putting out an opinion like, hey, think the Time should be nominated in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. All 7 members have contributed greatly to the success of the Minneapolis sound and have, in each in their own right, have had a tremendous amount of influence. And again, I can't stress enough, there are numerous categories. Even if some people want to put the argument that only a select few members should be inducted, mainly the big one, again, with the negative comments, was just nominate Jam and Lewis. But again, there's too many categories available in the Rock Hall in which the Time as a collective, both the original lineup and each subsequent lineup, can qualify for induction. And again, this same category, it can extend to the Revolution. It can extend to the various lineups of the new power generation. Because again, those members from Andre Simone to Des Dickerson, all the way down the line, Lisa Wendy, whoever, Jill Jones even, can qualify as a contributor because they did help and execute the vision of what Prince managed to accomplish. So yeah, it was his vision. Yes, produced, written, arranged, and performed by Prince, but he had a lot of help along the way. And he didn't lose sight of that. And like I said, he's nominated, in all fairness, in what I call the Legends category, which is that performers category. Each and every other category after that, then every, like, again, member of the Time, the Revolution, New Power Generation are equally deserving and should have a place in that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame museum. But what do you guys think? Leave a comment below. Again, hit me up Facebook. All the links are in the show notes here, where you can leave comments, topic ideas. But yeah, let me know what you think. Should the Time be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? I honestly believe so. It's not going to stop with this episode. I'm going to be like J. Jonah Jameson on Spider-Man with this. So this is just the beginning, folks. So I'm hoping that 2021 we'll get to see the Time in there. This is an idea folks can have for free. Let the people that run these things, let them do what they may. To each and every member of the Time, if you hear this, share it, echo it, shout it to the rafters. I just want to sit back, and when it comes on the TV, sit back and enjoy it, because you guys deserve it. probably get a bottle of Macallan and toast you guys and say, cool, you're in. So that's going to end this very special episode of Amari Purple Talk. Tune in to the regular episodes of Amari Purple Talk every Monday on your favorite podcast platform and also on YouTube. And of course, as always, keep it purple and on the one.